Recording. All right. Welcome to the Silver Speech Speaker Series. It is Speech and Hearing Month this month, May 2021. And today I have joining me is Alexandra. Alexandra and I have known each other a very long time. I started working with Alexandra when she was around 5. And we were working on slowing her speech down. She had some disfluencies, and I worked with the family and with her, and she did well. She graduated, and then here we are again. She is now in high school, and we're just doing some maintenance of her disfluencies. So I would love to hear from her experience about speech therapy through stuttering, because I think that I get a lot of phone calls for stuttering, and it's really good to hear firsthand from someone who's experienced stuttering themselves. I don't stutter, so it's a different experience. I can tell somebody to slow down, I can tell them to think about what they're going to say before they say it, but I can't experience that feeling of disfluency when it happens, or when it starts to happen, or when you feel it happening. So I'm really happy to have you here.
Thank
Okay.
you.
So I'm going to ask you some questions. I guess first I'm just going to have you tell me a little bit about yourself.
Okay. I'm Alexandra Cacciarelli. I am in high school. I'm in 10th grade. As Marcy said earlier, I originally started with her when I was really, really young. I started stuttering when I was in, I want to say, first grade or second grade. And it was actually when my first grade teacher was a speech therapist. So she pointed it out to me, and my mom set me up with Marcy, and I started doing exercises with her. And then my stutter eventually became better over time. And COVID kind of struck again, and being in isolation, being in the period of isolation like kind of just like brought some things up in me, and it kind of made my stutter worse again. So here I am back with Marcy, and we're working on my speech again.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I think it's really important during COVID that parents know, not only as adults we're experiencing anxiety or frustration or fear, but the children feel our fear, and they also have their own fears and frustrations and anxiety. So it's really important to know that behaviors are going to exacerbate, or things that you might have worked on in the past are coming up during the COVID pandemic. So, I'm here to just give more information about it, but also to hear it from the children themselves, and the teenagers, and the adults, as to what they're experiencing during COVID with communication. So, Alexandra, you had said you started stuttering about first grade. So, I want to know a little bit about what you think provokes your disfluencies.
So ever since I was younger, like I've asked my parents, I've asked my babysitter this, and everybody has said the thing that provokes my stutter are like emotions, and not typically like bad emotions, like negative emotions, typically like exciting situations. So when I would come home from school and I would have to like tell like an exciting story of something that happened at school, like I wouldn't be able to like say the words out properly, and I would just stutter everywhere. And the same thing with just like really chaotic situations where a lot of stuff was going around me, and like it would just, yeah, like I couldn't keep my thoughts in check, and I couldn't like organize my words out correctly. So it's mainly just emotions, and also reading out loud, because reading out loud is a fear of mine and every single other stuttering child's. Like it's one of our worst fears. So when you read out loud, it kind of, stirs something up in me, and I have to really, watch my speech when I read out loud.
Okay. So reading aloud is a trigger, and when you're in exciting situations or stressful situations, it increases or
Yes.
makes you stutter more than you already do, or um, through the strategies you've been able to work through it.
Yeah.
So, what about in terms of, are there any letters or sounds or words that are more difficult for you than others?
I personally have never like thought of like, oh, I stutter on this letter, I stutter on this sound, but my friend has pointed out to me that I can sometimes stutter on like L and B, but those are like the main two. I've never personally like thought like, oh, I stutter on this main syllable, but yeah,
Okay.
maybe just
Yeah,
those
and
two.
as a speech therapist, we do analyses on somebody stuttering. They speak to us, they answer our questions, we have them tell a story, and we're able to see a trend for, what letters may be provoked more, or, are you repeating just the syllables? Are you repeating just the whole word? Are you stuttering at the beginning of the word, in the middle of the word? So that's for us to determine. And when you were little, I would do that, but now that you're more aware, this is just the maintenance phase. Um, okay, so what do you do, or how do you feel when you meet new people, or what do you do for yourself to prepare?
So what I do is normally like it depends. Normally, when you meet someone for the first time, obviously you're going to try to, make a good impression, try to like show the person that you are likable and they do want to talk to you. So I've noticed this about stuttering, and Marcy and I have watched like a lot of documentaries on people stuttering, and I would remember we were watching this one video, and it was about this woman in a TED Talk, and she was talking about how like when you like kind of like increase the pitch of your voice and you change the pitch of your voice and you kind of like hide your personal self and you act like you're acting, it can actually reduce your stuttering. So I realize, sometimes with new people, like I can be a little fake, and that actually helps me a bit too, because it's kind of like, not that I'm not being somebody who I'm not, but I'm kind of disguising my voice in a way that I like the chances that I'm gonna stutter are reduced. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that yeah, we learned a lot from those TED Talks of stuttering. So that's actually a good thing for other therapists to do, or parents to watch TED Talks and hear adults who've gone through it, and then children who are going through the therapy process. And also actors and actresses. There's a lot of actors and actresses out there that stutter, and when they take on another role, they do not, because they're using a different type of voice. And so it takes them out of hearing their own voice. So that's a really good point. So, can you think of just some different techniques that we've worked on together thus far? What works, what doesn't? Um, you, you can let me know.
I think the main thing for me is, since I said before, like one of the main things that I like, the biggest struggle that I have with stuttering is stuttering through reading out loud. So what I do is, Marcy and I talked about a lot of different techniques. So what I'll do is Marcy actually told me this, but living in New York City, it's a bit stressful, like it's a bit stressful, like living in the big city, people talk really, really fast. So Marcy has taught me that, it's okay to talk slower than normal, because normal for New York is actually like a crazy speed for, people who don't live in the city. So when I'm reading out loud, I've learned to really slow down my words, and especially I like to pause before punctuation and words that I get anxious about. So I will just stop, take a breath, make sure I calm myself down, organize all of my thoughts, and then I'll just read. And I like to also drag out my words as well, too. So,
Yeah, and I think, as a therapist, I'm constantly having to speak to parents about slowing their speech down with their children, and in a way where it's not robotic, but they're speaking in commas and slowing their speech by speaking in phrases. And then the other thing is also not answering their child right away, giving a 3-second count before answering their question or piggybacking on the comment that they made. So, a lot of times, what happens is parents are interrupting their children, or they're so busy, they're just answering them to get them, moving. So, we have to be more cognizant as adults on slowing our rate of speech down, but also our reactions and our, how we answer back. Because we need to wait longer. And again, yeah, New York, we're always in a rush. I mean, from, getting up early for work, getting children out the door, getting ourselves out the door, worried about the bus, the subway, are we going to make it on time? So that increases the stress level and the pace of our life. So we have to try to calm ourselves down. So now that you're in high school and you're living through a pandemic, life has changed so much. We have online school, we have in person school. So I think it's important you touch on those two situations. So do you find yourself better online or in person? And how is that going for you?
I personally, there are ups and downs for both of them, but I think I'm better in person because I think online can be really nerve-wracking, especially it can like increase anxiety levels and it's just kind of distracting because you're literally like in your room, like with like my phone is in my room, like there's so much commotion going on at my house because everybody's home because of the pandemic, so it's just kind of nerve-wracking and it's like a, you know, an environment where I can't really just like yeah, I can close my door and stuff, but I have to like really really focus to make sure I don't get distracted in class because I do get distracted like very easily. So that is a factor. And then also I think one of my other fears for speech is being called on when I don't expect it, because then if I'm called on and I don't know what to say, then if I say the wrong thing, I'm going to freeze and then I'll just start stuttering like crazy. So when I'm in person, I can really tell when the teacher is going to call on me and I can kind of read like where they're looking, like what's going on in the classroom. So I can pick up on like some social cues. So I think being in person is definitely better for me. And it's also like the teachers, making sure I'm focused, making sure I'm on track with all of what's going on in class. So yeah, I definitely like in person better.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think that, teachers are learning this whole online process too. And I was just thinking as you were telling me this that maybe for some teachers, for some children or, teenagers, to give them a little heads up that they're going to be called on through the chat or something like that. Hey, you're next up, or you're runner up, or I'm going to call on you in 3 people, just so that you kind of prepare yourself versus, okay, start reading. You can tell, I think it's a good example of what you told me about when you were traveling in the car. So if you can
Yeah.
give an example of that.
That's actually a really funny story. It's kind of like an example of like a chaotic situation where I was just stuttering like crazy. But basically, I was in a car. I was going to Pennsylvania with my family, with my mom and my dad in the car, and it was actually like it was like a remote day. So I was doing Zoom in the car. So I was like joining in from my car. And as soon as I joined, like everything was crazy. Like my computer was like bumping around. My parents were like in the front seat, like arguing which way to go because something happened with the directions. And my teacher is just on the other end and he's just like, oh, Alex is in a car. Alex is in a car, like making a big deal about it. And everybody's texting me, like, why is he so like crazed up that like you're in a car? And I'm like, I don't know. So we start with class and he calls on me to read. And he's like, let's just let Alex read. And we're in English class. So I start reading the book. I just start stuttering like crazy. And it was so like nerve wracking and scary. And he made me like keep reading until I finally stopped reading. And he was like, okay, that's enough from Alex. And it was just so embarrassing, but it's just like such a good example of how like crazy, like chaotic situations that I'm not used to like really have an effect on me and how I read and how I stutter.
That's amazing. Yeah, it
So,
definitely, yeah, some situations are better than others. And that's like spur of the moment, on the spot. That's going to trigger the
yeah.
response, the stuttering. So, what about um, how do you handle that in classes? Have you broached the topic with your teachers? Do you not tell your teachers? How is that?
So it's actually funny because I recently just wrote an essay. We had to write like a how-to essay. So basically, I wrote how to raise a child who stutters. So I think my English teacher will know. And I think he actually read it because he used to call on me a lot to read during class and he actually stopped. So I think he is understanding, like, she gets scared to read, but none of my other teachers really know. But I am actually participating in a public speech class next year. So I think I'm definitely going to tell the teacher, be like, hey, just so you know, I have a speech disfluency and sometimes it comes out when I get really like stressed and nervous, just to let them know.
Yeah, I think it's, I think it's all up to you how you feel and how comfortable you are with telling your teachers. But I think it was a really good way through an essay to tell your teacher that. And then also, yeah, public speaking situation, it's excellent. And then also, you wrote, you were accepted into a summer program. And you can
Mhm.
talk a little bit about your essay that you wrote for that as well.
Yeah, so basically, I wrote about stuttering and what kind of like how I've lived through stuttering, how and I got into the program. So yeah, it's for Andover, so I'm very excited about that. Um, but yeah, I just wrote about like how I've lived through my stutter, like what basically everything that we've talked about today. I wrote my essay, like different techniques, like how like what I do to kind of like prevent or reduce like the risk of me stuttering, like what provokes my stutter, and just how like how my parents have helped me because Marcy, she mentioned this earlier, but I feel like, having a really like non-stress, like comforting environment is really important for a stutterer because, anxiety, we don't know the cause of stuttering, but part of it obviously comes from anxiety. So having a really like high stress environment is not good for stuttering. So my parents were really, really good with that. My parents were patient with me. They let me talk, they let me get everything out, and they never like tried to fix me, or they never like brought it up or made a big deal about it because that would have stressed me out. It made me stutter more. So yeah.
Yeah, and I remember, I when I talk to parents, it is always about, not showing fear when the stuttering is happening. When your child is stuttering, do not show any facial concern. Let them finish their thoughts. Let them push through the stutter. Don't stop them and have them repeat or tell them to slow down, because that will trigger more stress and more anxiety. It's the parents, we're the ones when it's at an early age, we need to think about how we're communicating. And then as you get older, then it's managing your own disfluencies. Um, So I think that that's really, really important to know. And then, teacher awareness. As a speech therapist, I try to make teachers aware that, don't call on the child initially, the first person. Call on them in the middle of the pack so they have time to prepare. Don't leave them till the end, because then it's more stressful. Um, so that's really important. And I love your essay was about overcoming, what obstacle have you overcome? So that was your essay, and then also your essay about, how do you teach somebody about stuttering, or a how-to narrative on how, what's happening
Yeah.
when you're stuttering or what
Yeah.
not to do. So that was excellent. So what about on the phone versus FaceTime versus in person, and how do you handle that with your friends?
I mean, for me, I've never really had like a big problem with phone calls or FaceTime because I feel like, again, it's like hiding under a mask. Like nobody really knows, especially when I'm like ordering something online or I'm talking to somebody I don't really know. It's really just like putting on that mask and disguising my voice as well as I want to. And then over FaceTime with my friends, not really. It's just like, seeing them face to face. But I will say, I noticed between like um talking to my friends versus someone who I like need to talk to seriously, I've noticed that talking with my friends, sometimes I will stutter more because I'm less aware in that situation because, they're my friends. I'm super comfortable with them. So when I talk to them, I'm very laid back, very calm. So I will stutter like more so because I'm in an environment where I'm comfortable and I'm not really like picking up if I'm stuttering or not. So I normally just bottom line, phone calls or FaceTime, I don't really have a problem with, but yeah.
Okay. And then when you're in, a new group or you're with friends, I love how you just come out and just tell them.
Yeah, yeah. Can I tell the story?
Absolutely.
Basically, I was out with my friends. We were standing on the street and we bumped into these two girls that I went to school with. And we were standing on the street and I stuttered and they were both like, "Oh my God, she just stuttered. That's so funny." And they were like trying to make fun of me a bit. And I literally just said, "Yeah, like I stutter." And they were like, "Oh, like you're diagnosed?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm diagnosed." And they were like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And I was like, "Don't worry about it." Like it's not a big deal. So I think the main thing is like just like don't make a big deal about it. And I've also noticed in school, if I ever do stutter, I know normally just not really to like make a big deal about it. Even if I'm freaking out on the inside, don't show it because then people will think, oh, maybe it was just a mistake. Like she didn't actually stutter. Like maybe I'm just making it up in my mind. And plus, also, stuttering really isn't a big deal. I don't really think it's a big deal at all. So if it does happen, it happens. And you can't really change it. So if it happens, you just got to own it.
That's great. Yeah. And I think, the more education people have, and yeah, if people know, they're not gonna, it's when you said, hey, I stutter, that's just who I am. It doesn't
Yeah.
define me. That's one of my characteristics. And
Yeah.
so they are much more, that they're blown away. They're like, good for her. She had the confidence to just come out and say it. So that's excellent. What about in performances? I know that you're a musician too, and also, anything in big audiences that might be intimidating or.
I mean, for big audiences, I really, really do not like stage fright scares me because there are just so many eyes on me and it's so nerve wracking. But I am a musician and I do play in a lot of concerts a year. Obviously, not right now because of COVID, but like last year, I played in a total of like 6 concerts. So, but actually, before I'm actually part of this chamber group and we had to like talk about the piece and I thought that was scarier than like actually performing the piece and I actually did really really well on it because I knew what I was going to say. I like wrote down on my music like what I was going to say about the piece. So normally I'm good. I just I just need to keep myself like make myself calm and collected and normally just be really, really clear about what I'm gonna say and really organize my thoughts well.
So when you have, for example, for this, right, we talked about what we were going to do. And so, I gave you some examples of the questions that I was going to ask you. So, did you have to, look it over and prepare, and then we were able to do this, or were you doing this off the cuff?
Well, I actually have my notes out, so I'm like really like I really need kind of like a general kind of like idea of what I'm gonna say. So I really need to like, especially when I'm doing like a presentation like this kind of like I really need to really like know what I'm going to say. So like not even like word for word, just like a general idea of what I'm gonna say, like bullet points, and then I'll be fine. So
That's great.
yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I think everybody needs that anyway. We always need to organize our thoughts and have some type of outline for big presentations or interviews, or and just practice. I do a lot of role play with my clients. It doesn't matter what the disorder or the delay is. It's role playing and practice for any situation, even a little child who's going to preschool. How are we going to act with other kids? How are we going to act with the teachers? So that's the the bottom line is we need that experience of practicing social situations, in order for us to be successful. Because if we throw ourselves in, it's we do get stressed and do have anxiety. So it's a really, really good lesson on preparation, planning, knowing, and then I think you have a really good attitude about it. About if it happens, let it go, not a big deal. And people we're so self-involved where we're thinking, oh no, they are still thinking about that stutter, or they're still thinking about what I said. People move on. There's so much going on in the world. They're not thinking about that. So I think that that's also a good point. Is so what, it happened. I have a million other things I have to get done, so I can't be dwelling on this disfluency. um, and that's a really good message, and that everybody has something to work on. We all have our strengths, we all have areas that need improvement.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love it. I think you were saying how you met a friend too on the subway, and you didn't know, but she also communicated to you that she had had disfluencies or something like that. I think you were on the subway with a friend, and she was like, "Oh, you stutter? I used to stutter too," or I can't
Oh
remember.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. She told me that she used to stutter and I was like, I would have never guessed that. And she was like, same for you.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was
and
crazy.
yeah, and I think that with stuttering, you can vouch for this, that sometimes it's just so inconsistent.
Yeah, I think that's really the bottom line. Like I personally I will never, never, ever know when I will stutter. Like I never know what words, what letters. Like I really just need to be cautious about every single word that I say, really, and just make sure I like really slow down what I'm saying because I really never know when it's gonna happen.
Yeah, and then I think the last thing I want to touch on though is because getting to know you as an adult, as a teenager, talking to you about the stuttering, and you're saying, I do feel it sort of coming on.
Yeah.
And that's really profound, right? Because as a therapist, I can't feel that. I can't experience that. So
Right.
you feel it coming on,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
sensory, it's motor, it's all of your senses happening at once.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's, I think, really interesting, probably for like further research in this area, and just talking to other stutterers about that. Like,
Yeah.
they get older, like, oh, I feel it coming on. It just it happens. I can't control it, but there is something that I feel when it's about to
Yeah.
come on.
Yeah. And it's literally at like the last second. Like I'm about to say something. And I think the worst situation for me is when I'm trying to say something. And honestly, so this is where the mask comes in. Like, because I have a mask over my face, you can't really see. But sometimes when I pause before words, I'm not pausing. I'm like underneath my mask because I'm trying to get the words out, but like I can't. It's like you're trying to speak, but no words are coming out. And I think that's just like the worst feeling about it is when you like literally can't talk, but you're really trying to. And it's just like, ugh. Like you want to like word vomit, but you can't.
So, do you find that the mask is sort of helpful for you in this situation, or is it actually more, I would think it's better because nobody can see.
Yeah, I think in some ways, I think for the most part it is better, but I can say one instance where it's not. One time I was reading out loud in class and my teacher, like I was reading words and I would stop before like big words that I was like thinking in my head, or I was like thinking before words that like I was kind of unsure about, and he would just jump in and he would say the word for me. But in reality, I was just trying to figure out and I was stuttering before the word. And I feel like if I didn't have my mask on, he would be able to see that and he could kind of read like my lips and read what I was saying. But since, we have the mask, he couldn't really see that and he was just like jumping in before me. And I was like, hey man, I'm trying to like figure it out myself. So that's like the one instance where, but I think besides that, yeah, I think the mask is really helpful.
Yeah, it takes the pressure off.
Yeah.
People looking at your mouth, or
Yeah.
I mean, I'm getting just phone calls because kids are unintelligible because of the mask, or
Yeah.
I'm unintelligible under the mask. So yeah, it's interesting, but that's a good point, is like that timing, they would have gave you more time, or
Yeah.
so yeah. So the masks, I mean, in itself have created communication barriers and communication difficulties. So it'll be nice, hopefully someday, to be able to, in the near future, take it off and have our mouths moving again so people can see
Right.
that. But I think this was excellent. It was so informative. I think a lot of people are going to get a lot out of it. I've been getting a lot of stuttering phone calls, disfluency phone calls. One last thing. Do you prefer a certain semantic term for stuttering? Do you refer to it as stuttering, disfluency?
Yeah, I mean for the most part when I'm talking like a professional scenario, I'll say disfluency, but normally when it's just like laid back and calm, I normally say stutter, but I know cuz Marcy and I have watched like these British documentaries and they always say stammering, stammering. So, I mean, obviously it's like different worldwide, but I normally say stuttering.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, in Britain or in, Europe, it's stammering.
Yeah.
There's, yeah, stuttering, disfluencies. There's something called cluttering. That's another
That's
term, but
funny.
it's definitely a different type of speech disorder. But this was so helpful, and I look forward to sharing with everybody this segment.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
It
It's
was
really fun.
so much fun, and
Yeah.
I look forward to sharing with everybody and having people ask questions, and maybe they'll have some questions for you. So,
Sounds good.
so
Sounds good.
much.
Yeah.
Okay, let me just. I'm gonna log off.